My name's Kevin Smith, and I'm a member of the working group on Constitution and Canons that's been revising the canons of the Diocese and has come up with a proposed set of canons that will be discussed at this May's Synod. For those of you who were able to make the 4 consultation sessions that we had throughout the Diocese, you'll have heard me give a version of this talk already. But for those of you who weren't able to make it, we thought it would be useful if I did a short summary of the reasons for these proposed revisions and just an overview of what we've tried to accomplish in this new working document. A copy of the current canons, the proposed revisions to the canons, and the 2 summary documents that I mentioned at the outset are available on the Diocese's website, which you can find right here. If you'd like, you can pause the video and access those now. If you go to the website, you'll see not only a full set of the current and proposed revisions to the canons, but also 2 summary documents, which I commend to you. One is an executive summary, which sets out the working group, the reasons for this proposed revision, and in some detail, where the substantive changes have been made. And the other is a table which summarizes on a canon-by-canon level what those changes have been. So hopefully you'll find those useful. Canons are a bit like all law in that over time they become amended, they grow, they evolve. And in doing so, they don't always line up as accurately as they did when they were first enacted. They become a bit overgrown. They require pruning. So to give you an example, if a canon is passed on day 1 that says, here's how we deal with money, a few years later, the diocese might see the need to pass a canon that talks about a particular fund. Those might not necessarily align with one another, or they require cross-referencing between the 2. To give another example, canons are sometimes repealed. And so in our current canons, we have Canon 6, and then there's a jump, and the next canon is Canon 10. And if you weren't there for every part of that process, it might not be clear why that was. The last top-to-bottom review that we did of the canons in this diocese happened about 30 years ago. And since then, as I've described, things have moved on. Cross-references don't always line up. And sometimes canons have just outlived their utility. And so it was considered an appropriate time to do a comprehensive root and branch review of our Constitution and canons to make sure that they're modern, that they're fit for purpose, that they allow sufficient flexibility, and that they're clear in how they set out authority, decision-making structures, and provide parishes the opportunity to adapt them and apply them in ways that make sense for them. The 3 main areas that we've revised the canons are what we term organizational revisions. There are some housekeeping revisions, and then there are more substantive revisions. So what do I mean by organizational? Currently, a number of canons which could be grouped together are spread out. They're not always easy to find. So for example, in the Constitution, there's an article on synod, there's an article on voting at synod, and there's a separate article entirely on how to make changes to the Constitution and canons, which requires a special majority. What we've done is consolidated those into a new single article on synod, voting, and how changes are made to the Constitution and canons. To give another example of an organizational change, the numbering system that we have in the canons is a little bit unique in that it has the canon, the next level is a division, and then within that it has a very particular numbering. So in Canon 14, the numbers will begin 1401, 1402, but then because the next division is Division 2, it'll continue 1421, 1422. That's not always very easy to follow, and so what we've done is given a whole new numbering system where it just says in Canon 14, 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, and so on. So we hope that people find that more straightforward and easy to use. You'll see at the beginning of the new proposed canons, there's a concordance as well that has the current canons in one column, and then to the right, the revised equivalent, so where you can find them in the old and the new canons if you're more comfortable working with the old ones. In terms of housekeeping changes, we've tried to be consistent in the terminology that's used. Right now, in our canons, from time to time, different terms are used for the same thing. So we use priest in charge. We sometimes use rector. We've been consistent by using priest in charge now to refer to the priest that's responsible for a particular parish. In our act of incorporation, the term church warden is used. In the canons, we occasionally use church warden, but we also occasionally say warden. Some people might wonder, are those different things? Are they the same things? And so we've been consistent with the use of the term church warden throughout. Those are just a couple of examples. In the area of substantive changes, one of the things that we've tried to do is to make sure that our canons are consistent with current best legal practices. We have a canon that establishes a diocesan court, for example. We've made clear in the proposed revisions that court should operate according to principles of procedural fairness, natural justice, and that, just to take an example, it should handle evidence in a way that's consistent with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. We've also tried to clarify how decision-making works in parishes. In some parishes right now, it's not clear whether trustees report to parish council or whether parish council reports to trustees, and that can cause some confusion. We've also tried to ensure that there's flexibility to adapt canons as necessary in between synods. Now, those changes will always be reported back to synod, but one of the proposed changes in the revised canons is to make the Canons and Constitution Committee a standing committee so that it operates all the time, not just in the lead up to synods. What that means is that if there are immaterial or non-substantive changes, that committee will be able to make the change and then have it ratified at the next synod, as opposed to, for example, calling a special synod just to deal with that. We would welcome any feedback. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you at synod, and thanks very much for your work helping us consider this important task.